So we're going to look a little bit further now on chronic renal failure. So chronic renal failure is a progressive, irreversible deterioration, mark that word, irreversible deterioration in renal function in which the body's ability to maintain metabolic and fluid and electrolyte balance fails, resulting in uremia or azotemia, which is irritation of urea and other nitrogenous waste in the blood. That is how you can define chronic renal failure. The etiology, the common cause of ESRD, that is end-stage renal disease, can be diabetic mellitus, followed by other conditions like hypertension, glomerulonephritis, obstruction of the urinary tract, hereditary lesions. Basically, the causes that we talked about earlier in acute renal failure, or environmental and occupational agents that have been implicated in chronic renal failure include lead, cadmium, mercury, and chromium. These are some of the things that can predispose somebody to renal failure or any condition that disposes somebody to renal failure can actually progress to chronic renal failure. And then a bit in the pathophysiology of chronic renal failure. Chronic injury of the kidney results in irreversible loss of nephrons. As a result, a greater functional burden is borne on the fewer nephrons that are left. There is an irreversible loss of nephrons, so the functionality of the kidney is left on the fewer nephrons that are left, and this is going to manifest in an increase in glomerular filtration pressure and hyperfiltration. For reasons not well understood, this compensatory hyperfiltration, which can be thought of as a form of hypertension at the level of individual nephron, predisposes it to fibrosis and scarring, which is what you're calling as the glomerular sclerosis. What is happening is that the few nephrons that have been left to handle the weight, they are going to work so much that at the end of the day, they will be predisposed to fibrosis and scarring because of overworking. As a result, the rate of nephron destruction and loss will increase. As the fewer nephrons that are left there, if they tend to undergo fibrosis and scarring, you find that the rate of nephron destruction and loss increases. That's speeding the progression of uremia, the complex of symptoms and signs that occurs when residual renal function is inadequate. Because of uremia, there will be a combination of toxic effects of retained products such as hormones, protein-containing products of protein metabolism, and there is loss of normal products of kidney such as erythropoietin. So this is basically telling that the normal functions of the kidney are going to be compromised. Excretory failure also results in fluid shift with increased intracellular sodium and water and decreased potassium. These alterations may contribute to subtle alterations in function of host and of enzymes, transport systems, etc. Uremia has effects on metabolism that are currently not understood, including decrease in nasal body temperature, perhaps due to the decrease of sodium potassium antipase activity, which accelerated atherosclerosis. So basically, the pathophysiology is more similar to what we talked about earlier in acute renal failure. So the clinical manifestation, even here, they're actually staged in 3 stages. Yes. So there is reduced renal reverse. In stage 1, there is reduced renal reserve, characterized by 40 to 70% loss of nephron function. The patient usually does not have symptoms because the remaining nephrons are able to carry out the normal function of the kidney. So then the few, here it's like not much of the nephrons have been lost. There's still a number of them that are carrying out the function of the kidney, that are carrying out their functions rather. Then in stage 2, there is renal insufficiency, occurs when 75 to 90% of renal function is lost. At this point, the serum creatinine and blood urea nitrogen is going to rise. The kidney loses its ability to concentrate urine and anemia develops. The patient may report polyuria and nocturia. Nocturia is the age of passing out urine. which is high when it's in the evenings or at night. Then stage 3, which is the end stage renal disease, the final stage of chronic renal failure occurs when there is less than 10% nephron function remaining. All of the normal regulatory, excretory, and normal functions of the kidney are severely impaired at this stage. End-stage renal disease is evidenced by elevated creatinine and blood urea nitrogen levels, as well as electrolyte imbalance. So when we talk about sodium balance and volume status under chronic renal failure, patients with chronic renal failure typically have some degree of sodium and water excess, reflecting loss of renal route of salt and excretion. Because these patients have impaired renal salt and water conservation mechanisms, they are more than sensitive to sudden sudden extra-renal sodium and water loss. That is vomiting, and sweating. They're going to lose much of water via those processes. Under these conditions, they will deteriorate in renal function, which may not be reversible and causing even vascular collapse. Then when it comes to potassium balance, hyperkalemia is a serious problem in chronic renal failure for patients with GRF, whose patients' glomerular filtration rate has fallen below 5 ml per minute. Above that level, patients with chronic renal failure generally do not have difficulties in potassium homeostasis because the GRF4's aldosterone-mediated potassium transport in the distal tubule increases in a compensatory fashion. However, this means that the patient whose GRF is between 50 ml and 5 ml is dependent on tubular transport to maintain potassium balance. These things that I've mentioned earlier. When you look at metabolic acidosis, the diminished ability to excrete acid and generate buffers in chronic renal failure results in metabolic acidosis. In most cases, when the GFR is above 20 ml per minute, only moderate acidosis develops before a re-establishment of a new steady state of buffer production and consumption. Metabolic acidosis is also happening because of the imbalance of electrolytes. The foreign blood pH in these individuals can easily be corrected with 20 ml of sodium bicarbonate by mouth daily. However, these patients are highly susceptible to acidosis in the event of sudden acid loss or onset of disorders that increase the generated acid load. And then we have mineral and bone. How is it affected in this condition? Several disorders of phosphate, calcium, and bone metabolism are observed in chronic renal failure as a result of a complex series of events. The key factors are diminished absorption of calcium from the gut, overproduction of parathyroid hormones, disordered vitamin D metabolism, and chronic metabolic acidosis. All these contribute to enhanced body reabsorption. And then we've got the musculoskeletal. The muscle cramps, loss of strength. These usually be because of the disordered vitamin D metabolism. Then we've got the cardiovascular and pulmonary abnormalities. Congestive heart failure and pulmonary edema are most commonly due to volume and water retention. We have pitting edema, preorbital edema, pericardial friction rub, engorged neck veins, pericardial effusion, pericardial tamponade hyperkalemia. This is giving a highlight of the various system disease conditions actually going to affect. So it also affects the pulmonary, cardiovascular and pulmonary system, the skeletal system, the metabolic balance of the body and everything else. And in pulmonary, because of the edema, there will be crackle sound, thick, tenuous sputum, depression, cough reflex, shortness of breath, uremic pneumonitis, that is uremic cancer. And then hematological abnormalities. Patients with chronic renal failure have marked abnormalities in red blood cells count, white cell count function, and protein parameters. Anemia is due to chiefly lack of production of erythropoietin and loss of full stimulatory effect on erythropoiesis. There is increased susceptibility to infections due to low levels of leukocytes that are being suppressed by the uremic toxins. Patients of chronic renal failure show laboratory abnormalities like prolonged bleeding and clotting time, decreased platelet count 111, and impaired prothrombin consumption. And then there is also neuromuscular abnormalities. The central nervous system symptoms and signs may range from mild to sleep disorders and impairment of mental concentration, weakness and fatigue, confusion, deterioration, behavior changes, loss of memory, errors in judgment, and neuromuscular irritability, which are manifested as hiccups, cramps, tremors, fasciculation, and twitching, burning of soles of the feet to stupor, seizures, and coma in the end stage uremia. So the neuromuscular is also affected. The GIT is also affected. Up to 25% of patients with uremia have peptic ulcer disease, perhaps as consequence of secondary hyperthyroidism. There is also uremic gastroenteritis, uremia causing inflammation of the gastric and the intestines, characterized by mucosal ulceration with blood loss in the chronic renal failure and distinctive form of bad odor breath due to degradation of urea to ammonia by enzymes in the saliva. That is what is going to lead to the odor breath, the bad breath. Non-specific findings including hiccups, nausea, vomiting, and diverticulosis. There's also endocrine and metabolic abnormalities. Women with uremia have low levels of estrogen, which perhaps explain the high incidence of amenorrhea and observation that they rarely are able to carry a pregnancy to term. Similarly, low testosterone levels, impotence, oligospermia, and germinal cell dysphagia are common findings in men with chronic renal failure. We have the dermatological abnormalities as well. Skin changes arise from the many of the effects of chronic renal failure. Severe itching is common, and the severe itching is what is termed as pruritus. Some patients may display pallor due to anemia, skin color changes due to accumulated pigmented metabolites, or a gray discoloration due to transfusion-mediated hemochromatosis. Finally, when urea concentrations are extremely high, evaporation of sweat. So here it's giving a highlight of how the hematological abnormalities are going to come in, mainly because of the severe itching, which is known as the pruritus rather. It is the common one, and then the major the display of pallor due to anemia. We'll have your anemia is going to be also skin changes because of the accumulated pigmented metabolites, or the gray coloration of the skin due to transfusion-mediated hemochromatosis. And then also the uremic frost, which would be due to evaporation of sweat, which leaves a residue of uremia. And then the goal when it comes to treatment of chronic renal failure, the goal is to maintain kidney function and hemostasis for as long as possible, because here there is a massive deterioration of the kidneys. All factors that contribute to end-stage renal disease and all factors that are reversible, e.g. obstruction, are identified and treated. Management is accompanied by primarily with medications and diet therapy, although dialysis may be needed to decrease the level of uremic waste products in the blood. Can be given antacids. These are given to treat hyperphosphatemia and hypocalcemia using aluminum-based antacids that bind with dietary phosphorus in the gastrointestinal tract. And then we've got antihypertensive and cardiovascular agent. If there is hypertension, control intravascular volume by reducing the salt content. So the person's salt intake is going to be monitored. Antidiuretics like Moderatic 1 tablet 3 times a day can be given. Also, digoxin can be given if there is a heart failure. So all this is to be able to maintain the blood pressure of the patient. Anti-seizures agent, if the seizures, give Valium either IV or IM to control the seizures. Erythropoietin is given using a recombinant of human erythropoietin. This is given IV or subcutaneously 3 times a week up to 6 weeks. This is given together with iron supplement for adequate response of erythropoietin. And then the nutritional status is still key. Dietary restriction is necessary with deteriorating renal function, and it includes careful regulation of protein intake, fluid intake, and some restriction of potassium. At the same time, adequate intake of calorie and vitamin supplement must be issued. The allowed protein must be of high biological value, e.g., eggs and dairy products. These have complete proteins and supply essential amino acids necessary for growth and cell repair. Then there is regulation of protein intake and fluid intake to balance fluid loss, sodium intake to balance sodium loss, adequate calorie intake and vitamin supplement, restrict protein because of urea, uric acid, and organic acid because these tend to be the byproducts of protein metabolism. High biologic value proteins, dairy products, eggs, meat are allowed. And then fluid allowance is 500 to 600 more than the previous day's 24-hour urine output. Vitamin supplement can also be given. So that is on the treatment of chronic renal failure. So that's it with today's lesson. I hope this actually helps you. This knowledge helps you to answer various it helps in the management of acute renal failure, and it has given you much more insight on the condition of renal failure. So until in the next lesson, I hope you still be with me. This has been Miss Kanyambo. Thank you so much for staying tuned.